The vibrant capital of the Dominican Republic, a city known for its colonial history and Caribbean rhythm, is currently facing one of its most daunting modern challenges. A relentless series of torrential rains, fueled by a persistent atmospheric trough, vaguada, and exacerbated by the warming Caribbean waters, has turned the bustling streets of Santo Domingo into treacherous waterways, leaving the city in a state of paralysis and its residents in a cycle of fear and recovery. As of April 8, 2026, the Emergency Operations Center, COE, has placed Greater Santo Domingo and the National District under a yellow alert. What started as seasonal showers quickly escalated into a deluge that has overwhelmed the city's drainage systems. In less than 24 hours, rainfall totals in certain sectors surpassed the average monthly accumulation, a phenomenon that meteorologists at the Dominican Institute of Meteorology, Indomet, are increasingly linking to shifting global climate patterns. The visual evidence of the disaster is staggering. In affluent neighborhoods like El Millón and Los Prados, luxury vehicles are submerged to their rooflines. On the 27th de Febrero Avenue, one of the city's most critical arteries, traffic came to a complete standstill as floodwaters rose above the medians. Residents in more vulnerable areas, such as those lining the Ozama and Isabela rivers, have seen their homes invaded by muddy water, forcing many to seek refuge on rooftops or in government-sanctioned shelters. In an unprecedented move reflecting the severity of the situation, the Dominican government has mandated remote work, teletrabajo, for the public sector. This decision aims to minimize the number of people on the streets, allowing emergency crews, including the civil defense, the fire department, and the military, to navigate the city more effectively. Presidential spokespeople have urged the private sector to follow suit, highlighting that the primary goal is the preservation of life. Major universities and schools have suspended in-person classes, pivoting back to the virtual platforms that became standard during the pandemic years. The recurring nature of these floods has sparked a heated national debate regarding urban planning and infrastructure. For decades, Santo Domingo has experienced rapid, often vertical growth without a corresponding upgrade to its subterranean drainage systems. Much of the city's core relies on infrastructure built over 40 to 50 years ago, designed for a population and a concrete footprint much smaller than today's reality. Garbage and plastic debris frequently clog the limited storm drains that do exist. During heavy rains, these blockages act as dams, causing water to back up into homes and businesses within minutes. The concrete jungle effect means that rainwater has nowhere to seep into the ground. Instead, it gathers on the asphalt, following the natural slope of the land toward the sea, but often getting trapped in depressions in the urban landscape. On social media platforms like X and Instagram, the hashtag #LuviaSRD has become a repository for distress calls and citizen journalism. Videos show neighbors forming human chains to rescue elderly residents from flooded houses, and delivery drivers abandoning their motorcycles as currents turn side streets into rapids. We have lost everything: the fridge, the beds, the memories, says Maria Altagracia, a resident of the La Puya sector. Every time it clouds over, our hearts race. We are living in a state of permanent anxiety. The economic toll of the 2026 floods is expected to be in the hundreds of millions of pesos. Beyond the immediate damage to vehicles and property, the interruption of commerce, the loss of working hours, and the damage to the electrical grid are significant. Insurance companies are bracing for a surge in claims, while small business owners, many without flood insurance, face the grim reality of starting from scratch. Meteorologists warn that this is not an isolated event. The Caribbean is seeing a trend of extreme precipitation events, shorter, more intense bursts of rain that the current urban environment simply cannot handle. The warming of the Atlantic Ocean provides more moisture for these troughs to feed on, making even minor weather systems potentially catastrophic. Public works officials have announced plans for a master plan for storm drainage, a multi-billion-dollar project that would require years of construction and significant international financing. Critics, however, argue that the pace of implementation is too slow. We cannot keep reacting to the rain with buckets and sandbags, says urban planner Dr. Jorge Herrera. Santo Domingo needs a radical transformation in how it manages water. This includes green roofs, permeable pavements, and, most importantly, a massive overhaul of the underground pipes. As the rainfall is expected to continue through the weekend, the COE has issued the following directives. Stay indoors. Unless an evacuation order is issued for your specific area, stay off the roads. Avoid high-risk zones. Do not attempt to cross flooded avenues or bridges. Even a foot of moving water can sweep away a vehicle. Avoid contact with floodwaters to prevent the spread of waterborne diseases like leptospirosis, which often spikes following urban floods in the region. Meanwhile, the Autopista Duarte, the most critical economic and transit artery connecting the capital city of Santo Domingo to the northern Cibao region, has been transformed into a sprawling, impassable river. Following a series of relentless torrential downpours triggered by a stationary atmospheric trough, the highway is currently the epicenter of a logistics and humanitarian crisis that has paralyzed the National District and its surrounding municipalities. The segments near Kilometer 9, Kilometer 12, and the entrance to Los Alcarrizos have seen water levels rise to over 4 feet in some sections, effectively trapping thousands of commuters in their vehicles. The scenes at Kilometer 9 are particularly harrowing. This transit hub, which serves as the primary gateway for thousands of workers entering the city, is currently a graveyard of stalled cars and abandoned public transport buses. The rapid accumulation of water left drivers with no choice but to climb onto the roofs of their vehicles to escape the rising currents. The flooding of the Autopista Duarte is not merely an act of nature. It is the result of a catastrophic failure of urban engineering and maintenance. Several factors have converged to create what experts call a perfect storm for the highway. The Duarte Highway sits in a natural depression in several key areas. Without adequate pumping stations, the water has nowhere to go once the rudimentary side drains are overwhelmed. Factor: large amounts of solid waste, ranging from plastic bottles to construction debris, have been swept from nearby informal settlements into the drainage grates. This has created a plug effect, causing the highway to fill like a swimming pool. After weeks of intermittent rain, the ground in the surrounding green belts can no longer absorb moisture, leading to 100% runoff directly onto the asphalt. The human cost of the Duarte deluge is rising by the hour. Rescue teams from the civil defense and the military have been deployed using flat-bottom boats and high-clearance trucks to reach those stranded. "I have been sitting here for 7 hours," said Rafael Mendez, a truck driver transporting produce from Santiago. "The water came up so fast I couldn't even put the truck in reverse. Now, my entire cargo is ruined, and I am just praying the current doesn't push the truck off the shoulder." In the nearby neighborhoods of Pantoja and Los Peralejos, which border the highway, the situation is even more dire. The overflow from the Duarte has backed up into the residential drainage systems, sending sewage-tainted water into hundreds of ground floor apartments. Local clinics are already reporting an uptick in skin infections and respiratory distress among children and the elderly. The Autopista Duarte is the lifeblood of the Dominican economy. It is the path through which food, fuel, and industrial goods flow from the fertile Cibao Valley to the ports and markets of the capital. With the highway severed, the economic impact is estimated to be in the millions of dollars per day. Supermarkets in Santo Domingo are already reporting delays in the arrival of fresh produce, and the Association of Industrialists, AIRD, has warned that manufacturing plants in the Jaina and Herrera zones may have to suspend operations if their workers cannot navigate the Duarte to reach their shifts. Presidential authorities have declared a state of emergency for the National District. The Ministry of Public Works, MOPC, has dispatched heavy machinery to attempt to clear the drains, but crews are finding it impossible to work while the rain continues to fall at a rate of 50 millimeters per hour. The government has officially extended the remote work, teletrabajo mandate for all non-essential personnel. "Do not attempt to reach the Autopista Duarte," warned the director of the COE in a televised briefing. "The highway is currently a danger zone. Our priority is extraction and rescue, not traffic management." A localized downpour of biblical proportions struck sectors like Los Prados, Piantini, and Ensanche Quisqueya. Because the city's concrete surface offers no permeability, the rainfall immediately gathered into fast-moving torrents. The most viral and heartbreaking footage emerged from the Olof Palme Street and the Abrahan Lincoln Avenue. In these areas, the water rose so rapidly that it bypassed the curbs and transformed the streets into Class 3 rapids. Witnesses captured the moment a silver sedan was lifted by the current, spinning helplessly before crashing into a concrete utility pole. "I was just trying to get home to my kids," says Carlos Tejeda, a 42-year-old accountant whose SUV was swept nearly 2 blocks from where he originally stalled. "The water was at my tires, and then, in a blink, it was at the windows. I felt the tires lose grip. I wasn't driving anymore. I was floating. I had to kick the door open and swim to a nearby balcony. I watched my car disappear under a bridge." This sentiment of suddenness is a recurring theme. The Emergency Operations Center, COE, reports that many of the vehicles swept away were occupied at the time the flooding began. Emergency responders performed over 40 high-water rescues in a 4-hour window, often using ropes and human chains to pull people from sinking cars. While the entire city is under alert, certain black spots have proven particularly dangerous for motorists. The 27 de Febrero underpasses. These subterranean routes become literal death traps. When the pumps fail or the drains clog, water fills these tunnels in minutes. Several cars were found completely submerged, abandoned by drivers who barely escaped through the emergency stairs. In lower-income sectors like La Barquita, the rising river levels didn't just flood the streets, they reclaimed them. Vehicles parked near the banks were pulled into the river's main channel and carried downstream toward the Caribbean Sea. Los Rios and Arroyo Hondo, known for their hilly terrain, these neighborhoods saw flash cascades. The gravity-fed water gained enough velocity to flip smaller vehicles over, stacking them against each other in narrow alleyways. As the images of floating cars dominate the news, public anger is mounting. Critics point to the Ministry of Public Works, MOPC, and the City Council, Alcaldía, for failing to clear the storm drains, imbornales, ahead of the hurricane and rainy seasons. "We see the same cars floating in the same streets every 2 years," says urban engineer Dr. Elena Rosado. "The warnings from Indomet are accurate, but the city's response is reactive. We need a smart city drainage system that can handle 100 millimeters of rain in an hour, or we will continue to see Santo Domingo turned into a maritime graveyard every time a trough passes through." As the images of floating cars dominate the news, public anger is mounting. "We see the same cars floating in the same streets every 2 years," says urban engineer Dr. Elena Rosado. "The warnings from Indomet are accurate, but the city's response is reactive. We need a smart city drainage system that can handle 100 millimeters of rain in an hour, or we will continue to see Santo Domingo turned into a maritime graveyard every time a trough passes through."
La respaldo Higüey Aguacate en Arroyo Bonito de Manuguayabo. Así está. Esta es la situación, muchas inundaciones. Esto es una calle.